Hi everybody and welcome to another piano video here on the Millennium Piano's YouTube channel. We are diving into Kawai Digital Piano Actions in today's video. Now Kawai has more digital actions than any other manufacturer, and so we're going to be splitting this up into portable digitals and home digitals. This first video is going to be all about the portable digital actions that Kawai has on the various models. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you are in the market for a portable digital piano and Kawai is one of the options on your list, we really hope that you check this out and find it helpful. If it's the first time that you have found us here on YouTube, thanks so much for stopping by. And we'd ask that either now or at some point in the video, if you're really enjoying it, hit that subscribe and the notification bell. We really love seeing this community grow and would love you to be a part of it. Without further ado, let's dive right in with Kawai's digital piano actions on their portable series right away. For any piano company out there, there really are two holy grails of design and manufacturing. That is getting the perfect sound and the perfect touch. And that all sounds very obvious, but when one dives into the Kawai universe, it becomes very obvious that they take this maybe more fanatically than others. And this takes a couple of forms. One is that there is this constant experimentation and evolution going on with both their sound engines and their actions. I can't think of another company where there are more frequent improvements and changes undertaken model cycle after model cycle compared with any of the other companies that I've seen out there. I don't know of seeing Roland change their tone engines and actions this often, or Yamaha, or Korg, or Nord, or anybody else out there. And so the reason we're doing this video is not that there's necessarily a lot of confusion out there around Kawai digital actions, but it's very hard to get synthesized complete information on what all these actions are and how they're different from one another and what that might mean to you as a shopper or as a player. There are at this time no less than 9 distinct Kawai digital piano actions currently on the market. So this includes the RHC action, the responsive hammer compact action, the RHC2, the RH3, then we've got the Grand Feel, the Grand Feel Compact, the RM3 Grand 2, the Grand Feel 3, and then the Novus 5 Upright action and the Novus 10 Grand action. 9 in total. How are they different from one another? What is the Kawai continually trying to improve upon? Well, it falls into 2 areas, really. One is durability. Kawai long figured out that their pianos are winding up in some really high use situations. And so you find these continued improvements on making these actions last through thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of use. So we're talking about durability as one of the focuses of innovation. And then the second one really is geometry or feel. So how do we get these keys to behave more and more like a real piano without bulking the weight up to, say, something like a Novus and the cost of a Novus? So just continually improving upon lubrication, specific pivot points, weighting, all of this kind of stuff. And so across the span of, say, 10 years, which is really about the total length of how long some of these actions have been out there, you get these continuous releases of new, improved actions. Now, of all of the actions I've mentioned, these fall into 3 categories. One are the plastic actions, which are really focused towards their lower half of their home digital series and most of their portable digitals. Then we've got kind of the wooden hybrid actions, which use more or less an acoustic wood key with some of the same principles, construction principles, and geometry principles that you'd find in an acoustic piano. These are what populate a lot of their CA series. And then you've got the Novus actions, which really are just acoustic hybrid actions, starting more as acoustics with some very slight modifications to get them sending digital signal through the use of optical sensors. And because there are so many of these actions, we're going to divide this into two videos. So we're going to do another video where we cover all of the home digital and Novus pianos. This video, as we said in the introduction, is really focused on the portables because quite often those are two separate customers. We have people who are either looking for portables or looking for something at home, and so that is why we chose to divide this into two videos. So let's start with the R.H.C. Now the R.H.C. stands for Responsive Hammer Compact. Now this it was an evolution from their first R.H. action, the Responsive Hammer Action, which went into some of their first CN product. And this was a shrunken action, so a slightly shorter key stick, slightly lighter weight. And the R.H.C. wound up most recently in the ES110, but you can also find it in the KDP 75. And so this is still a current version. Now they haven't renamed it, but there is a slight improvement upon the action that you're going to find in the KDP 75, and that is that there is improved cushioning. Now why is this a big deal? Well, manufacturers and probably piano players who do a lot of playing back and forth between both acoustic and digital will know that the key bed and the sense of how a key is cushioned on the bottom has a huge impact on your sense of feel and weight and just how you connect to the key. When you're on an acoustic grand piano and that key frame has lifted just ever so slightly, even a millimeter off of the key bed so that there's just a tiny bit of give, the immediate sense of loss of power is pretty extraordinary. You hear acoustic manufacturers talk all the time about the importance of reinforcing that key bed. And until you've experienced the opposite of good reinforcement, it really sounds like a lot of spin. But the minute that you have just a tiny bit of give, the amount of power and the loss of efficiency you get in the kind of the translation of that downward motion into power to the hammer is pretty extraordinary. It's really no different on a digital piano. And so improved cushioning and improved reinforcement of a key bed on digital is certainly going to have an impact on your impression of that action. So that R.H.C. action translating over to the KDP 75, having that improved cushioning, but also basically the same action still available on the ES110. Now this action has no escapement or let off, and it also has a double sensor versus a triple sensor. So what do these things mean? Well, no escapement for some people's worlds has absolutely no impact at all. Escapement is one of those things that's a highly specific feature that some people are going to derive value from. For me personally, it gives a little more control when you're playing in your lower dynamic ranges. And specifically, escapement, of course, is what you get when you are pressing a key down, and it's that little blip that you feel as the jack is pressed off the knuckle. That's what happens on an acoustic, and on digitals, some actions simulate that. So these don't have that. Now, for beginners, and I would say for most hobbyist players, this is a non-issue. The second thing I mentioned, which is the double sensor versus the triple sensor, simply means that there are certain playing situations where you may get slightly less accurate MIDI data, either going to the tone engine or to an external device if you have MIDI hooked up to it. So this kind of makes it a non-starter for commercial grade MIDI input or MIDI triggering. If you were going to be doing a recording for a live show, not such a big deal. And of course, for beginner players, again, I really don't see this as a deal-breaking issue. But it is something to be aware of for professional players who are looking for budget purchases. I would still steer towards instruments that have that triple sensor versus the dual sensor. The other thing is the R.H.C. action, because they've shortened the key, Just as it happens in any key, of course, the one that probably created the most discussion over the last few years was Casio's smart scaled actions on their PXS 1000 and 1100, where you've shortened the action so much that the pivot length causes these huge variations in the pressure needed between the back of the key and the front of the key. The RHC is not nearly that dramatic, but you can still certainly feel that effect with the RHC. A third reason why it's probably best intended towards a beginner audience versus a more experienced player. Next, we will move on to the RHC2. Now, what's the big upgrade here and the difference between that and the RHC? Triple sensor. So here is where, if you were somebody with some commercial need or somebody who was playing more advanced repertoire but still really wanted to stay in the budget range and the weight range that the RHC offers, RHC2 is a really good solution, because with the inclusion of that triple sensor, you are just upping the accuracy of your overall MIDI output. And because of that, you may also be able to get a little more specific with your tone curve and really personalize the experience a little bit more. You're going to find that RHC2 on the KDP 120. You're also going to find the RHC2 on Kawai's ES520. And coming very shortly, you are also going to see this on the new ES120. So there's going to be 3 models using this RHC2. Once again, the KDP 120, ES520, and the new ES120. Third on our list is the RH3. Now, this action has received a huge and deserving level of kudos in the marketplace. This has come from professional musicians, this has come from sellers, this has also come from other manufacturers, and probably the biggest compliment of all, Nord, who has a huge following in the kind of the upper echelons of professional music making, used that RH3 action when they released their new Nord Grand, which is a product that's received rave reviews, not the least of which is because of its touch. So the RH3 has longer key sticks than what you get in the RHC. Obviously, it's not the compact version, so you're getting that longer key action. It means because of the longer key action, there's less gradient between the front and the back of the key in terms of the pressure it needs. You've got an upgrade to the key surface, so it's starting to feel a little bit more like a real acoustic key. The plastic is a higher quality. It's also a little bit thicker. It now includes a let-off or escapement. Those two things are essentially interchangeable when we're talking about actions. So it has that little blip for, like I said, for me, slightly more control when you're playing in those lower dynamic ranges. And the overall key frame with the RH3 is more reinforced and a little more rugged than what you get in the RHC. So the RH3 is really the first point in Kawai's Action series where you could truly say, okay, this is an all-weather, any situation, full professional action. And all you have to do is Google Kawai RH3 and you're going to come up with multitudes of reviews and message boards and forums talking about just how playable and enjoyable the RH3 is in terms of its geometry, its weighting, its responsiveness, all of that. You're going to find the RH3 in the CN29 as well as the upcoming CN201. You're also going to find it in the CN39 or upcoming CN301. They've got it in the DG30, which is a digital grand piano. But from the portable standpoint, of course, we've got this on the ES920 as well as the MP7 SE. Fourth on the list is the Grand Feel wooden key action, and this is found only in one model, which is the MP11 SE. This is Kawai's beastly wooden key action stage piano, which is designed in their minds, but I think in the minds of a lot of consumers who've experienced this, the most realistic key touch in a portable situation that you could possibly deliver. They are very, very heavy to carry around. We're talking about the keyboard itself, the MP11. So there's a lot of situations where a professional musician who would otherwise have loved to have this on a gig, it just doesn't work because you need a roadie or a forklift to really do this on a nightly basis. But for people who are touring and have proper tour support, people who are doing a lot of pit work, or people who are in studio situations, the MP11 SE has been a very popular machine. The Grand Feel Action is totally different than the plastic actions in that you have a wooden key which approximates the overall weight and dimension and material of an acoustic key. This action is not specifically hinged in any way. Really what it is it pivots on a center balance rail, just like in an acoustic piano, and it maintains its lateral alignment by hugging and fitting over a front pin. So this is exactly the same design principles that are used in acoustic piano building, both uprights and grand pianos. At the very back of the key, you have a piece of slip tape, which pushes up a capstand and then activates a hammer. So you bypass the whole whipping mechanism, and there is a simulation on there to give you the aftertouch, not aftertouch, but rather let off or escapement. And then there's a triple sensor to sense the pressure, velocity of that hammer as it swings up. So the sensor is not on the key itself, which makes sense. It is on the hammer so that the result of the motion is what you are measuring. These actions in some variety or another go back almost 2 decades. I mean, you can find some of these early wood actions in some of Kawai's very first MP series. There was MP 9500, I believe, was one of the first ones that used some of these wood actions out there. So Kawai's been evolving these for a long time, and the one that happened to make its way into the MP11 SE was the Grand Feel. I don't know that there's really any reason why Kawai couldn't include, say, the Grand Feel 3 in an MP11 SE, other than that it's going to completely change the form factor. You're going to have to redo all of your internal arrangement of your components because it's a slightly different layout. But in terms of concept and technology, it certainly would work. I would think we're probably going to see a successor to the MP11 SE come out at some point, and very likely will include the most recent version of the Grand Feel, which at that point may be the Grand Feel 4 or Grand Feel 3. So just one model, but it is the only stage piano on the market that's using full-length acoustic wood keys in something that you could term a stage piano, meaning it's generating its own tone. That's really what makes it distinctly different than the VPC-1. Fifth action and final action that Kawai uses in its portable series. So the VPC-1 and the MP11 SE came out at 2 slightly different times. That's the reason why each got a slightly different geometry of action. The VPC-1, in what has to be the most snarled up naming convention of any of the Kawai actions out there right now, is the RM3 Grand 2 action. Don't even ask, it is what it is. RM3 Grand 2 wooden action. That is what is in the VPC-1, and that is the action which immediately preceded the Grand Feel action that went into the MP11 SE. There is not a huge difference between these two actions in terms of concept. Really, the difference is in dimension and geometry. So there's a difference in the key length, there's a difference in the position of the pivot point, but other than that, there are no meaningful differences in the materials used, durability that you find on those two actions, or the overall concept of how the hammer interacts with the key. The differences really do lie in geometry. with the MP11 being the more recent version. There's some really interesting debate out there where some people actually prefer the feel of the VPC-1 over the MP11. Of course, there's a large crowd that says the opposite, that the MP11 is the better feeling of the two between that and the VPC-1. What is clear is that the VPC-1 is certainly one of the most beloved MIDI controllers out there, and between the physical machine and the software to help you tailor things like touch curve and other MIDI parameters, you see this still being used a lot in VST demonstrations at NAMM. You still hear about this being used quite a bit in studios where primarily the piano tone is coming from a VST, and the VPC-1 is the trigger of choice. Kawai does make a professional portable unit that uses the RH3 as well, which is their MP7 SE. Even though the MP7 SE and 11 SE are lumped into the same category, they are two incredibly different beasts. So looking at the entire array of portable Kawai Actions, I would say the most important thing to keep in mind is that there is definitely a line in the sand where if you want a professional action, which is going to give you the durability but also the full range of what digital technologies can deliver in terms of responsiveness, you want to be at an RH3 or higher into your wood actions or in that plastic action. Which one you're going to like is such a personal thing. Of course, the ideal situation is get to a store, try them side by side. If not, of course, we've got all of our videos here on the channel where we do our very best to explain and talk about my feelings and impressions of those actions. If you are a beginner and you are not in need of an action which is going to give you that level of detail, and you're going to enjoy some budget savings because of it, then you've got your choice between the RHC or the RHC-2. We really hope that this video has added some detail and some depth to your understanding of Kawai's expansive line of digital piano actions. And of course, check out the other video that we've made on this where we go through the actions offered in the Home Digital and Hybrid series. Also, if it's the first time that you've checked us out here on YouTube, we would really appreciate if you hit that subscribe and the notification bell so that we can have you back as a viewer. We'd love to have you. We love sharing all of this information and our passion for pianos and music making. My name is Stu Harrison. This has been Millennium Pianos on YouTube, and we'll see you again soon.